excited that Dr. Strang and Dr. Isis are here again for the third time, and we always love the time that we spend with them. But yes, I want to welcome you to our virtual Mental Health Mondays, where we engage the arts and creativity to explore topics that affect our health and well-being. I'm Kimberly Kirkland, and I'm with UAB Arts and Medicine, and our mission is to enhance healing and wellness, both in healthcare settings and also in community settings, using arts and creativity. So this evening, we would love to know your name and where you might be Zooming from, and if you have a particular interest in the topic tonight, or anything that's kind of on your heart as we start this. This is being videoed, or recorded, as you can see. So while we would love to see your faces and engage with you, we also understand if you want to keep your camera off. And please feel free to just put in the chat any questions that may come up for you or any comments that you have. And Dr. Strang and Dr. Isis, we'll get to those as the evening goes on. But I'm so excited to turn this over to Dr. Chris Strang and Dr. Patricia Isis. There are many things, and one of those things are they're registered art therapists. And tonight we're going to do some mindful doodling and talk about self-compassion, compassion, compassionate listening, and other topics. So at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Strang.
All right. Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully that works for everybody. Feel free if you have questions going through, and if you want to unmute yourself and ask questions, we're happy to have you do that. And tonight, our hope is to offer specific mindful doodling exercises. We're going to use those to symbolize and integrate concepts to help you cultivate mindfulness for yourself and for acting in the world. We're really going to focus on the acting in the world, protecting, providing, motivating, and we'll also have some exercise in compassionate listening. Patricia, what would you like to add to that?
Well, I'm just delighted to be here with you all, and our hope is that in this short time that you will take away some tools, both for yourself first, and then everyone else who's lucky enough to know you or engage with you. So without further ado.
Yes. So what we're going to do is first set an intention, and then we'll provide some introductory information. We'll do a little bit of our warm-up, give you a little bit more information, and then a little bit more art. And we'll talk about the art that you make, and we'll try to put everything together at the end. And if we have our timing right, we'll do this in just about an hour, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, and make sure you have your art supplies nearby, just paper and something to make marks with. So really, this is all intention driven. That's what makes it mindfulness based. And to create an intention, it's really rather simple and a wonderful practice for us daily, frankly, because it makes meaning for us. It helps us ground ourselves to what really matters for us. So we invite you to create an intention. Go inside, ask your heart, why am I here? We know you could be doing many other things right now on a Monday evening in December, in early December, and you're here with us. So we invite you to create an intention that resonates with your heart without using the word want, to create a direction, an anchor for yourself that you can revisit. And when it comes to, if it does come up, we invite you to write it down.
You could doodle the intention if you prefer. Just kind of, for me, I'm here to deepen my knowledge of art therapy, of how compassion works in the world, and my intention is hopefully to learn from you all as we discuss this, to teach and to learn.
My intention is to inform and inspire you all to find your version of mindful self-compassion through your own ways of creating in the world. So we wanted to give you a minute or two for this. We don't mean to rush you. We're just on the TikTok. And so obviously when we're off of this session, we hope that perhaps if you need more time, you'll create that for yourself to revisit some of this process that we're offering you.
Okay.
All right.
So remember, the intentions anchor us to our purpose, and they provide a tone and meaning for us. So leave that intention kind of the back of your head and the back of your heart as we go through tonight. And what we're going to do is just start off talking about what is self-compassion. And we use the term mindful doodling, so we want to tell you what that is. And then the idea is to apply that. How do we use this for ourselves? How do we use this to allow us to act in the world, right? So we want to enhance our self-compassion and enhance our ability to integrate in the world and to act in the world.
Which is sorely needed in this moment of all moments. So to begin, what is self-compassion? Well, Dr. Kristen Neff, who is associate professor at the University of Texas at Austin, actually wrote her dissertation on mindful self-compassion when she was getting her PhD at Berkeley. And she came up with the 3 core components. And so I invite you to join me here to experience these components in your body, if you like. It's an invitation, of course. And the first is mindfulness. So I invite you to make a fist with your dominant hand and notice the experience of your fist. What do you notice? Maybe you could put in the chat room what you notice from this experience. Does anyone notice any kind of resistance? Self-compassion is a practice of self-care, but your fist here, right? Strength, tightness. Thank you. Yes. This is resistance, warmth, tension. This is what we do when we're confronted with adversity as humans. This is normal, but it also creates a lot of more resistance because what we resist persists. It creates a larger version of the adversity. So I invite you to open your hand slowly until it's flat. Yes, it is a little uncomfortable and contraction of muscles. Yes. And notice your experience now with a flat hand. You can put that in the text if you like. What's the difference now with this flat hand?
Notice if you're holding your hand tensely or loosely as it's flat as well. There's no wrong way to do it, but just notice.
Yeah, notice. Because this is a relinquishing of control. So this does not come naturally. This is mindfulness. This is also tender self-compassion, allowing whatever we are encountering in the present moment, in our bodies and in our lives, with awareness, with acceptance. This represents mindfulness. Notice the difference in the experience. Yes, it's more spacious. It's a metaphor for tenderness, peacefulness, calm, acceptance. It does not, this is counterintuitive. Okay, so this is the first component of mindful self-compassion. We have to know what our experience is in the present moment to understand whether we need compassion or not. If we don't know what our experience is, we're not going to have any idea what we need. So the mindfulness question is, what is my experience right now in my body and my life? Once I know that, then I can move to the second component, which is self-kindness. And I invite you to take one or two hands, place them on your heart. And what do you notice? If you'd like to put in the chat room, what comes up for you with this experience? Self-kindness. As you can see in this wonderful slide that Dr. Strang created, we tend to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes, when things don't work out the way we hope that they did, when we failed. We tend to blame ourselves and we move into resistance and create more adversity. This is about noticing, ouch, this hurt me. I need a little bit of tenderness. This is the second component of self-compassion. So mindfulness versus over-identification, which is going into all sorts of directions with our minds, thinking, oh, it could have been this way, why isn't it that way? Instead of being with what is, which is the open hand. Self-kindness is, oh, it's okay. I'm human. Of course this happened to me. And the third component is when you place your hands out, if you'd like to put them on the edges of your Zoom window, it's about that we're all in this together. We're not ever alone. And we tend to believe that we are the only ones going through whatever it is that's so difficult. And we aren't ever the only ones because we're so intricately connected. And from a mindful self-compassion standpoint, rather than isolating, which is what we tend to do when we're hurting, we don't want other people to find out that we messed up, made a mistake, failed. Yet, so many other people are out there doing the same thing. And we're hurting ourselves rather than realizing this is human. This is our condition. That's where the tender or yin part of mindful self-compassion comes in.
And I like the comment about the contrast of contraction and flexion is like holding or releasing. And that's very much it. Holding, releasing, and then caring and connecting. They all tie in together because it's hard to do this with your fists closed as well. But we're not taught in our society to care for ourselves too much. We're taught to be critical. So it's important to realize that this can be, as someone said, awkward and uncomfortable to do this type of connection with oneself and connection with others.
And that's why it's a practice. We create a way to bring it into our lives, your way. That's the only way, is your way. There isn't one way, there is only your way. And only you know that by practicing. You get to know that in time.
Mm-hmm. And that brings us to kind of this balance of being with ourselves and that connectedness of acting in the world.
Yes, and you can see how important it is to have both and a balance between the yin, which is comforting, which is self-kindness, and soothing, which is the common sense of humanity, knowing I'm not ever alone, and validating, which is mindfulness. So that's the tenderness of mindful self-compassion, the yin. Most people are familiar with that. The yang is a little less familiar to many people because it's about taking skillful action in the world through protection, which is self-kindness, providing, noticing that we're not alone in the world. We're there for ourselves and each other if we choose to be, and motivating because we know our experience in the here and now through our mindfulness practice. So the trick is here, the balance between the yin and the yang, finding it, maintaining it.
So that brings us, so we've kind of defined mindful self-compassion, the yin and the yang of it. And the next definition, we need to talk about what exactly is mindful doodling and how does that relate to what we're talking about?
Right. So when we're adding mindfulness to doodling, which is typically random, I suspect a lot of you are doodlers. Does anybody want to raise their hand? How many people here are doodlers? Oh, we have a good group of doodlers here. And what we know about doodling now is that it actually enhances memory retention. It has a whole other status in life. When you're doodling with intention rather than random, like a scribble, you are providing yourself with an opportunity to shift your relationship to whatever it is going on with you. And you're making the invisible visible, coming from the inside outside, like your breath, so that you're taking whatever it is you're using to mark and you're making a shape that has meaning and allows you greater perspective taking and an opportunity to soften your awareness, which is the compassionate piece, because you now have the experience. It no longer has you. And you're giving yourself an opportunity to relate to it with tenderness and with skillful action at the same time. So these are some examples from the Mindful Doodle book of mindful doodles. As you can see, the fear doodle is a little bit more impoverished. This particular student at one of the schools that I work at. And then self-love doodle is fairly, it gives you such a perspective on how you look at things, because we don't have access to that consciously, generally, of what is your perspective. Has everything to do with whether you respond versus react. And angry doodle really speaks for itself. I don't think there's much more I can comment on that one. Coming off the paper at you. We all can relate to that.
Yeah, so that brings us to the idea of putting this into a little bit of practice. So we're going to do a quick warm-up. This is just a couple minutes. And so the first part we want to talk about is safety, right? Anytime you're doing artwork, anytime you're doing anything about feelings, it's always important to be aware of your safety. And Patricia has developed this lovely safety mandala about the different layers and levels.
Yeah, and this is actually not by me. Kristen Duff and Chris Germer, who's the other co-author of the Mindful Self-Compassion curriculum. If you're interested, you can go to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion online and find out all about the trainings and things like that. What we show in the very first class, I've been a certified teacher for 7 years now, is this mandala, because we want to make sure that you realize your boundaries. Safety is where we go when we need a place to pretty much hang out without much movement. And so think about what makes you feel safe. And if you, this would be a wonderful art experience for you too, in your own time. Put what makes you feel safe in there. However, we don't grow in safety. We grow in challenging. And like the pandemic, for example, we were all pushed into, and still are, into very challenging opportunities to find our way through all that was going on that switched everything up. That's where we grow. That's where we discover more about our ability to move in different directions. However, invariably, we end up overwhelmed. For example, anxiety turns to panic for some of us time to time, or people we know, or grief turns to depression. So when we're overwhelmed, and the only way we know that is through mindfulness, through our experience of connecting to our body, honestly, we have to go back to safety whenever that happens. So with mindful self-compassion practices, it's important to know what you're ready for. You titrate yourself, baby steps. We're not diving into adversity. We're noticing it gently. We're touching it with a lot of, as much distance as you need. And that's what this is about. All as much as you can for yourself, not pushing yourself, but moving in a safe flow as you feel comfortable.
So with that in mind, we're going to have you do a very quick exercise first, and then we'll follow it up with the next exercise. You may have noticed that there's a 2 and a 3 on this page. So what we're going to have you do is first take your paper and pencil, whatever materials you have, and just very quickly, no wrong answers, make 6 to 10 random marks on the page, on a piece of paper, just random marks. And I want to answer John Lambert in the chat talked about children needing safety and permission to express themselves, and I believe that's absolutely true. But I also think that the only way children can learn that is if parents and adults and all of us are allowed to have safety, and that we have our own permission to express ourselves. We have to do this by modeling, because, excuse me, we have to do this by modeling. Children learn what they see and what they observe, not just what we tell them. So I think we have to be models. And I think that's going to be, think about that when we talk about acting in the world.
And notice your experience as you make these marks, because it's really easy to go back on automatic pilot where many of us live all the time. We miss so much. Just notice.
All right, everybody make some marks. All right, now we're going to change it up a little bit. We're going to give you a little bit more time. Now we're going to ask you to make 3 intentional marks, not just random marks, but we'll give you a couple of minutes. Make 3 marks with intention. Be present for yourself. Be present with the page, and 3 intentional marks. There is no wrong way to do this, but be aware of what it feels like.
And this is done without judgment, as best you can if you can drop the judgment, because we're not attached to an outcome through doodling. Doodling is spacious and expansive and allows us to just be where we are with mindfulness practices. I mean, that idea of conscious, deliberate, intention-driven, not deciding it's ugly, it's beautiful, it just is.
Mm-hmm.
There's no wrong answer.
So as you finish up your marks, some of what Patricia was saying is what you can think about is how can this mindful doodling that you just engaged in, because those 3 intentional marks were a very simple form of mindful doodling. So let's take a minute and feel free to unmute yourselves. And you know, what was your experience doing the random marks or the intentional marks? How, what was this like for you? What was this about?
What did you notice?
I noticed connectedness, that my intentional marks were about forming some form of connectedness without, with the unintentional marks.
Hmm.
So trying to make sense, I guess, in a way.
Yeah. That's important, making sense and connecting.
Yeah, and that you noticed it is
Mhm.
also very important. You saw that, you took it, that because that may not have been your intention from the beginning, and then it came through for you from the doodling, from the mindful doodling.
Mhm.
Anybody else? What'd you notice? How might that enhance your self-compassion? What did you say, Carlene? I see you're in the chat. Oh, somebody said engrossing. Couldn't make random marks without anticipating what I might ultimately have to turn into an actual drawing. So that's a really good awareness that the mind stepped in and pushed for an outcome, which is what happens. That's what the mind does. And you noticed it. And so then you get to make a choice how you want to navigate that particular intersection, because the mind is going to come in and push for something.
So I really liked the free. It was really an interesting contrast when it was random, and then the more defined. It was very freeing and relaxing, just doing the random marks, and then doing the ones that were more exact. It just had to be aware of. Otherwise, it was just like, okay, whatever happens, happens. So I kind of liked. I like the combination.
So that, to me, that almost sounds like that you were able to withhold judgment, you were able to act without judgment, but with noticing on the freer ones. But then, and I see somebody else mark that something similar, the intentional for people brought in a little bit more judgment, brought in a little bit more outcome driven types of things. If that's kind of what I heard. I don't know if that's completely accurate.
I think that probably is it in a nutshell. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So with your awareness, with your noticing, the piece is how then do we bring this into the world? How do we bring this back into self-compassion? You had to let go of the judgment, right? Or to make the unintentional marks, or sometimes people are here even partway through. But how do we then bring that into the idea of self-compassion and acting in the world?
Yes. So Dr. Kristen Neff recently wrote another book called Fierce Self-Compassion. In fact, I'm going to hold up the book here. You can see it. How women, it's particularly for women, although certainly men can benefit as well, how women can harness kindness to speak up, claim their power, and thrive. And she refers to the yin and the yang as tender self-compassion, which we talked about, that acceptance of ourselves, noticing if my mind comes in and interrupts my process and wants me to have some kind of attachment to a certain outcome, accepting that that's part of how I cope. And noticing my patterns, my habits of thinking and acting in the world, and balancing that with taking action, or what she calls mama bear, which she talks about. She's the mother of an autistic son, and she talks about many times when her son was acting out and having a meltdown, which happened quite frequently, and other people would be really judgmental and make comments. And she would set limits and advocate for her son. And so, like the gestures we used for the yin of mindful self-compassion, I invite you now to place your feet flat on the floor. And if you want to stand up, you can. And it's called horse pose. You can do it sitting up straight in your chair, where you it's like in martial arts, where you're standing like you're riding a horse, and you're balanced, you're grounded, and it puts you in a pose of protection and strength, because this is important in terms of what is going to help me maintain in a position of great adversity or challenge, when I need to take action for myself. I need to at least protect myself. So I invite you to join me, if you like, placing one hand out like this and moving it forward, saying, no, this is a boundary maker. No, feeling what that feels like. Many of us, she wrote this for women because, as a woman herself, she realizes how often women as caregivers, still as a stereotype in our culture, have a real hard time saying no, because you don't want conflict. When you say no, you may encounter some conflict. So then the motivation is making a fist and going, you can do it. You can do it. You can do it. That motivation, knowing you can do it. And then providing is this motion, bringing what you need for yourself to maintain the boundaries and the protection, feeling all of that in your body. And so that's what this graphic really describes. And you'll see there on the bottom right-hand corner where it talks about countering the gender role socialization we have all, men and women, been steeped in. So this is a step-by-step whole process of practicing in your own way. If any one of these gestures, hand on the heart, hands out, reminding you you're not alone, or this, or what we just did, resonate with you, you might want to incorporate it somewhere in your life to remind you that you deserve that balance between tender and fierce to allow you to thrive in the world, creating that balance. And Dr. Strang and I were talking about this, like in my own life, I'm dealing with some health issues right now, and I'm realizing how I'm maintaining the balance by advocating for myself as a patient. Because if I don't do that, my images of what I want my health to look like that I'm doodling on a daily basis because it feels good, motivate me to continue to protect and provide for myself, to stay on top of things. So that's just an example of how I incorporate this in my own life.
And I incorporate it in a couple different ways. Working at UAB or different places, I have to be able to say, no, this is as much as I can do, right? I can do this, I can do that to stay motivated, but I have to be really careful in what are the boundaries of what I'm able to do a good job at that I feel like I'm capable of doing well. And saying no is hard. Saying I can't do that. I can't set that limit. It can be really difficult. Yet, if I want to be a model to students or to clients that I see, I have to model for them. That's how I end up, providing in the world or how it goes out into the world. If I want somebody else to be able to set boundaries, to be able to care for themselves, I've got to be able to model it honestly and authentically in my own life. So I have to practice. And it comes out in my artwork. My clinical work is with people with eating disorders. I'm currently doing a whole series of female bodies that are, they're containers for planters and that type of thing, but they're not, they're solid. And one person joked that they have a BMI of 35. They're very feminine, but that's also reminding me to accept myself and my own body as it changes. And that's okay. So we all have ways of dealing with things. And I use creativity to kind of help with that, which I'm going to use as a transition into the idea that the whole point of us doing this is to help you all see how creativity can be a catalyst for change, how creativity can help practice all of these ideas of being tender with oneself, acting in the world, setting boundaries, that creativity can be a support for mindfulness. Somebody earlier remarked that he used drawings of loops to make himself think more, so that you can use directly using creativity to support intentionality, which is great.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be elaborate or take a long time. That's the beauty of mindful doodling. It could be a minute, it could be hours, it's up to you, and you don't have to buy expensive art supplies either. Mm-hmm. We're talking about it's simple and accessible and comforting, mm-hmm. and validating exactly what's happening for you. Your version is what matters.
Mm-hmm. So with that, we are going to try to integrate this and give you an art process, again, a little bit longer, not a lot of time to do art, so it's going to be more simple. And so you're going to have to be generous with yourself and open with yourself as you do this art, because you're not going to have a lot of time, and it doesn't have to be an artistic tour de force, but instead it's a doodle that you're going to create. And what we'd like you to do is to build a single intentional image from any of the marks that you created previously. The person who thought, oh, gee, I can't stop thinking about how I'm going to turn these into an art product. Yeah, that you weren't wrong about our intention with that. But that doesn't mean that there's a right way to do it. It's just whatever this directive means to you, however you hear it, however you hold this idea, just build a single intentional image from any of the marks that you used, and see how that. We're going to give you just a few minutes to do that, and see how
Go
it
ahead.
works for you. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to comment on John's chat contribution. That John, so you're aware of what your change agents are: pens, pencils, and paintbrushes, to help reduce the noise of technology. Good for you. That's another opportunity. Yes, as well as getting to know yourself and what your needs are. Yeah, so see what happens. Again, there's no wrong answer.
See if you can be aware and intentional, but not outcome driven and not judgmental. And that can be difficult.
Yeah, it's non-striving. We're not trying to get anywhere. We're being with ourselves as we are, with tenderness and skillfulness, the way you naturally relate to anyone you care about. Somehow we don't treat ourselves the same way we treat other people we love. Isn't that something to imagine? How did that happen? That's good that you know you're judging. We're not asking you to stop judging. We're asking you to pay attention to the judging. I'm speaking to the person that just wrote in the chat room, I can't quit judging. Well, that's very human. Yeah, we notice the judgment and then we let it go. Just like many of the thoughts we have, which are, most of them are random and we believe them, yet they have no evidence behind them. So we're only going to take another, what, minute or two? Yeah. Agreed, Carlene. You're absolutely right. With social media and the pressures of fitting in, it does add another layer of challenge for judgment and striving.
It's hard to be vulnerable to share something or know what is good enough to share. Yet some of the most powerful stuff is both vulnerable and beautiful, even if the person who creates it doesn't see the beauty.
Yeah, exactly. And our humanness, our human condition,
Mhm.
of being imperfect, flawed, all of us.
Mhm. The other, I think, part of the self-compassion also is validating ourselves. That performative piece almost gives us it almost reinforces that idea. If somebody didn't see it, it didn't happen. So this self-compassion is also about validating it for ourselves internally. And that's so very hard. Yeah, many of us don't be curious, not judgmental. That also takes time and practice. And I practice it every day, you know. All right, go ahead and finish up. Because there's the other piece of this is, what do we do with it then? If we're not performing, if we're not judging, what then should we do with it?
How can we utilize it best?
That's a better way to say it. Much
Yeah.
better. So that's where it's the idea of compassionate listening. And we're going to give you a chance to practice that.
Yes, and what it involves, you do the best you can. This is again counterintuitive. Yes, I agree with you, John. Vulnerability is definitely critical to to relationships in general.
Mhm.
So
Authenticity.
yes, and authenticity, absolutely. So for compassionate listening, if you want to uncross everything while you're the listener, lean in and listen with your whole body, paying curious, kind, compassionate attention, hearing without interrupting or giving any advice. Just allowing that person to be seen, to be heard, what we all long for. And because of time, it's going to be very brief, but we're going to give you each an opportunity to share about what you noticed with this intention-driven doodle that you just created, however you wish to, whatever you want to say about it, and then move on to the next person. If you don't want to speak, that's okay. Then you can give your time away.
Mhm.
But we want everyone to have this experience and opportunity.
Mhm. So what we're going to do to give you that opportunity, we're going to throw you into breakout rooms just briefly and give you the chance, because we've got a great turnout tonight. We've got a lot of people, and to have everybody have the chance to be heard, we can't do this in the larger space. So we're going to put you into small breakout rooms with 3 to 4 participants per room. To give you a chance, we're going to give you a few minutes. Each person take a little bit of time. I'm trying to get this to give me exactly. I've got 8 breakout rooms, 3 participants per room. And you're going to take turns just saying whatever you want to say about what you created, about your intentional marks. And the other 2 people will listen. And then each person will take turns. We're going to give you about 3 minutes. So you have a minute per person. And as Patricia said, if you want to give up your time, you can. We'll send a message to the breakout rooms when it's time to switch.
Right.
Um,
And
what-
notice how it feels to listen in this way, and notice how it feels to be heard in this way. So that's really what this is about too, to have that experience, as well as validating, just speaking your truth about your art.
So in a minute, in just a second, I'll hit create and you'll get invited to a breakout room. You can choose, if you don't choose to join, that's fine. We'll even out the numbers if anybody's alone in a breakout room.
Enjoy. Looks like maybe only half of the people joined at this
Okay.
point.
All right, I'm going to move some people around.
So if you're not interested in joining, notice that you made that choice.
Oops. Let's see. Okay, I think it looks like we mostly have 2 to 3 people for room. Um, and if you chose not to join, that's fine. Just um, think about your experience, um, and what you noticed creating that experience. And I'm going to have people um, switch rooms or switch broadcast.
And notice what you need instead. If you did not want to participate in this, how you knew that was a boundary you needed to put up. So how do you want to take care of yourself during this short period of time instead?
If you want to continue doodling, you're welcome to.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sending a message to switch speakers again. It's not a lot of time to share.
No, it's just a taste.
Mhm. I'm closing the breakout room, so people should start rejoining us.
Okay.
All right. So with this, whether you were, let's see, I guess I need to reshare. Oops, wrong one. Those are my pups. try that again. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
good. All right. So whether you're in a breakout room or chose not to join, think about what did you notice? What might you have learned? What do you need to practice? Think about what would you like to share with the group about your experience? And again, you can unmute yourself or type into the chat.
How can you make this matter as related to your original intention at the beginning of our time together? How can you put this into skillful action in your life? Somebody was saying something about connection earlier. That must be a theme for you. It doesn't come up otherwise, unless it's probably from your heart, more than likely. That you may not have noticed it without making the invisible visible. Does anybody want to comment?
I'll comment. So when I first put my dots, I ultimately connected them. And then when I did my next three, they all kind of lead to me. Not that I'm the center of attention, but that I've been inspired by others. And so I'm connected to others.
Yet centered on yourself and centered in your world is also really important too. You know.
It's interesting that you made dots and connected them. So that's probably has something to do with your perception, your way of thinking about things, thinking about one thing and connecting it to another thing, or the way you create things, make things happen.
It's the way I create things, yeah. That's the way I see the perspectives, the angles.
Yeah.
Nice.
Important information for you in taking care of yourself.
Yes.
Thank you, Fran. I see John wrote something in the chat room.
You know, it's a great practice to journal, write, doodle every day, to give yourself that space just to be with yourself and notice. In fact, one of the things we had mentioned is you may even just for this make some notes for yourself from tonight, even if you choose not to share, to make some notes for yourself about what you noticed, what you learned. If there was a takeaway point from this that you want to make sure that you have, add it to your doodle, add it to your notes. And also let us know if you have any questions that you still have. Is there anybody else who'd like to talk about the process of either learning or what it was like in a breakout room talking to a stranger about your process?
Or being heard and seen. What did that feel like? I see Laura wrote, connection's very important to you. Yes. Music and energy. Wonderful. Thank you, Laura.
I thought it was a wonderful experience. And I loved getting to share, but also I've learned a lot in this little bit of time because it is another way to journal, an art journal, because I like to art journal, but it doesn't have to be, it can be very loose and expressive, and you're not, at first I wasn't really thinking. Usually I have to think, like, what am I going to create? I wasn't thinking. And then you do some things that are more exact, but just very freeing. And then to just look for what shows up, and then your ideas about how do you apply this to what do you want your life to look like? I thought that was a really interesting prompt. So the safety of connecting with people that were kind, that's really nice.
Really? And I love the moment when I noticed your judgment and then you can just let it go. Isn't it? It is so freeing. You have a choice. Exactly. I'm glad you found it grounding, Tanya. Yes, because the doodle becomes our anchor, like our intention. Yes, increasing our awareness safely as we're ready to increase our awareness, which is also an act of self-compassion in action.
We have just a few minutes left, and so if anybody else wants to share, or if you have any questions for us before we close, we'll take just a couple minutes for comments or questions.
And we have a closing poem for you. We did want to show you a picture of the Mindful Doodle book. If anybody's interested in obtaining it, it's $20 on Amazon or Pessy.com. I'll put it in the chat room.
All right. Well, let's move to the poem.
Okay. So I love this poem by Miller Williams. It has a wonderful edge to it, which I think we all can relate to. Have compassion for everyone you meet, even if they don't want it. What appears as bad manners, ill temper, or cynicism is always a sign of things no ears have heard, no eyes have seen. You do not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone. And so with poetic license, you could also make this poem about you. Have compassion for yourself, even if you don't want it. What appears as bad manners and ill temper or cynicism may be a sign your ears could no longer hear, your eyes have since overlooked. You may not know what wars are going on down there where the spirit meets the bone.
I love that. That's great.
Thank you. You can find it online. Just look up Miller Williams Compassion, or take a picture of the slide if you like.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So you offer these classes to different places at schools, or what do you ladies do?
Yeah. So there are a couple of different things. So the Mindful Doodle book is something that Patricia has available. She also has Miami Self-Compassion. She can tell you about that. That's an online training. And then Kristen Neff has has compassion training. So if you look at the Mindful Self-Compassion workbook or Fierce Self-Compassion listed here, they can all be, those are all books that you can use for yourself. Patricia and I speak together occasionally. This is the third year we've done the Arts in Medicine. We just did a workshop at the American Art Therapy Association conference. We don't yet know when the two of us will speak again together, but we really love doing it. So hopefully we'll do stuff about this again. And I know we're going to do it this time next year, but that's a long way away. And then Patricia, do you want to say anything about the self-compassion?
Sure.
Miami Self-Compassion?
Sure. I'm just putting my email in the chat room. I teach the 8-week evidence-based mindful self-compassion program that was developed by Kristen Neff and Chris Gromer. I was trained by them back in 2016, so I'm certified. There's many certified teachers. I teach online. If you're interested, just get in touch with me. I have a website also. You could also go to the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion. They have a lot of online courses there as well. I'm going to put my website in here if you're interested in looking it up. There also is a short course that's only 6 weeks. I don't teach that as often because I think the 8-week course is much more helpful to people because we're dealing with adversity, and this is, again, counterintuitive. We're so excited that you all could join us today. We're really hoping that you're leaving with much more than you came with. This is such a delight. I really want to thank UAB and Dr. Strang for this opportunity. And thank you all. We couldn't do it without you.
Yeah, I really appreciate Arts and Medicine for having us back every year. It's kind of a highlight of the year. It's a nice way to end things.
Very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you both so much for being here. Yes, you are currently our only annual event. So we love having you every December. And I thank everyone else for joining us as well. We do this once a month, unfortunately not with Dr. Strang and Dr. Isis every month, but our next one will be January 23rd, where we're going to talk about the health benefits of dance, not necessarily physical benefits, but mental, emotional benefits, and how it can support people with conditions like Parkinson's disease and other chronic illnesses. So please join us. And again, thank you so much for being here. And thank you, Dr. Strang and Dr. Isis.
Thank
Thank
you,
you for
everybody.
having us.
Thanks for having us. Take care, everybody.
Bye.